This will not be quick. This is probably going to be longer than the last video that I made. But it will not be difficult either. I've spent the last part of 2 years now working on this video or a script for this video in some shape or another. I've spoken at great length and explained at great length to a number of people what this new understanding of fascism is. And I've become very good at explaining it. If I had to boil down everything in this video to a single thesis, a single statement of understanding or intent, what I would say is that people have tended to misunderstand fascism because the traits of fascism are, by design, fungible. And that I would propose a new understanding of fascism so that we can better understand who is doing the fascism. This new understanding of fascism has two parts. The first part is an obsession with purity of ethnicity, purity of spirit, and purity of ideology. Not necessarily all three of those every time, but one or more of those. Usually all three. The second part is expressing that obsession with ethnicity, with spirit, with ideology, by committing acts of needless, wanton cruelty towards those judged not to possess that purity. None of these phrases, none of these words were chosen at random. I would hope that I don't have to explain what purity of ethnicity is, and yet here we are. Purity of ethnicity is not necessarily just one's race or skin color. More commonly, it should be understood as having a shared homeland. When white nationalists talk about their ethnicity, they're not talking about being white. They're talking about having a homeland, having a place where they come from. The nature of this homeland is fungible. There are people who claim that it's as big as all of Europe, and there are people that claim that it's as small as single towns. Purity of spirit is not just about religion. Religion is a big part of it. You'll find a number of these fascists trying to ban people on the basis of their religion. But it also encapsulates gender and sexual orientation, and it encapsulates certain practices within a religion. One can be the wrong kind of Christian. I don't think that there are a lot of white nationalists who would accept the Universalist Unitarian Church as members of the white race, for example. If obsession with ethnicity can be understood as a desire to come from a shared homeland, obsession with spirit can be understood to be a desire for a shared pattern of behavior, shared actions in a certain direction, common beliefs. Purity of ideology is a bit more difficult to parse out, in part because you don't really see it in the real world that often. Purity of ideology doesn't just mean that you follow the system. It means that you believe in the system and the things that the system does, wholeheartedly. The preeminent example that I would give to people is INGSOC from 1984. Not only did INGSOC find and prosecute, very publicly prosecute, people who did not believe in the ideology of the party, but they went so far as to deliberately create dissidents within the party so that they could prosecute very publicly those people. As I said before, you don't see this often in the real world, but I can think of at least two examples. Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia wanted to wipe out the entirety of all Western education, and they went so far as to execute people for the crime of having to wear glasses. And Augusto Pinochet in Chile and his regime, well, I'm to understand the lucky ones got off with being thrown into the ocean out of a helicopter. Something that needs to be understood about the ideology of fascism is that the actual ideology doesn't matter. It can take any form, it can take any shape, it can be any ideology. Right now, you have people who are fascists by this new understanding, who present themselves as being nationalists, like Christopher Cantwell, the crying Nazi, who present themselves as being communists or even Maoists, like Jason Unruh, who present themselves as being capitalists, like Milo Yiannopoulos, and who present themselves as being liberals, like Richard Spencer. The belief isn't important because the belief only exists to enact the final stage of fascism, where those who do not believe in the ideology are purged from their ranks. The words needless and wanton are not random descriptive words either. Needless can be understood to mean that the proposed solution is worse than the problem it would solve. Think the gas chambers in Nazi Germany, or separating children from their parents at the border here in the US. Wanton can be understood to mean that it happens in excess. So not only does it not work, but they keep doing it anyway. The cruelty doesn't serve any purpose but its own cruelty. I also feel it would be remiss of me not to mention that while in this new understanding of fascism that I'm presenting, the fascism can take the form of any ideology, any sort of belief in government or even economics, it has more commonly manifested itself in right-wing spaces. There's a reason for that. Fascism is inherently individualistic, but we will get to that later. For now, I think maybe it would be beneficial to explain who is doing the fascism, and maybe why. Fascism in a modern context, in the United States and Europe at least, ought to be understood as a loose coalition of three broadly defined groups: the white ethno-nationalists, the sexual repressives, and the capitalists. There is no one group waving around a fascist banner saying, "I am the fascist, I am doing the fascism." If only it were that easy. But with this new understanding of fascism, we can understand who these people are that are doing the fascism, and maybe even why they're doing it. The largest of these groups, and the most common, at least by number, are the white ethno-nationalists. The white ethno-nationalists, quite straightforwardly, seek to reduce the number of non-white people in their country. You've seen this in Great Britain with their nativist movement, led by Tommy Robinson. You see this in the US, not just in the ongoing humiliation that is President Trump's efforts to fund the border wall, but also in his efforts to keep Sunni and Shia refugees from the Middle East from entering this country. Also in the US, the war on drugs is explicitly racist, but that's a topic for another time. Any group that calls itself nativist, that calls itself anti-immigrant, that calls itself white nationalist, or white supremacist, or Nazi, or neo-Nazi, obviously falls into this category. There are also specific organizations, like Richard Spencer's outfit, American Renaissance, if I recall correctly. The white ethno-nationalists have the power to field a great number of people at any given time, if they have enough preparation. And savvy people, understand that and are willing to use that to their advantage. To say that sexual repressives seek to make straight, cisgendered white men the most dominant force in the world is an oversimplification. But as a matter of function, that is what these people want to do. Most commonly, this occurs by stripping LGBTQA+ people of all of their rights, even their recognition in some places, like in Russia, where they don't even acknowledge that homosexual people exist, and here in the United States, where the Trump administration tried to stop trans people from serving in the military. These sexual repressives are unique in that they are not so much groups, so much as commonly shared ideologies. Trans-exclusionary radical feminists, for example, or anti-trans activists, as I've been trying to get people to call them, are fascists. They seek to repress the rights of trans people, up to and including denying that they exist. Incels are inherently fascistic, they are fascists. They seek to deny women of their entire personhood, turn women into a commodity to be used by men. Of course, there are anti-LGBT organizations. You've got your Focus on the Family, you've got your Westboro Baptist Church, but the plurality, the vast majority of these organizations are Christian in nature. Not just religious, but specifically Christian in nature. And people don't tend to fall for those unless they've already fallen for them. When I use the word capitalist, it should be understood in a Marxist sense. The word bourgeois would be equally accurate here. What I mean is that there is a small group of people at the top of society who are exploiting the people underneath them. All of those people. I don't mean every person who believes in capitalism as a functional economic model, or everyone who participates in capitalism. That would be most people in the world. And that would be nonsense. But it does need to be stated that these fascist organizations, either implicit or explicit fascist organizations, would not exist if it were not for the support of politically powerful and financially salient individuals. That's what makes the capitalists in the fascist spectrum, this new understanding of fascism, unique. They tend not to be organizations, but very powerful, very wealthy individuals who are funding fascist organizations in order to oppose organizations that would demand changes to the capitalist system. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. To put it another way, the capitalists consider the fascists less of a threat to them than, say, anti-fascists. And they're willing to work with the fascists to stop reform from happening within the capitalist system. Something that the fascists also want, incidentally. It would also be remiss of me not to mention that not every person in the capitalist class is supporting fascism. People like George Soros, people like Bill Gates, people like Nancy Pelosi are not supporting fascism, obviously. But there is a very large contingent of the capitalist class, including Donald Trump, who either explicitly or implicitly support fascism, both politically and financially. And like the last video, this shouldn't be understood as a call-out. This isn't something you can solve by crucifying one individual. It's a societal problem. Which brings us neatly to our next topic. There's an episode of Captain Planet, a TV show that aired in the 90s, where Captain Planet, this mighty being powered by nature, meets Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler is able to weaken Captain Planet just by looking at him. And that always perplexed me as a child. Adolf Hitler wasn't a monster, at least not in a literal sense. He did monstrous things, certainly, and I don't mean to diminish or deny that fact. That's why I'm making a video about the fascism. But Adolf Hitler was a real person who really existed. He was born in 1891, if I recall correctly, and he died, by most accounts, by all reasonable accounts, in 1943 of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He's a person who lived and died. Adolf Hitler was not some kind of rampaging beast whose nature it was to destroy everything he touched. Adolf Hitler decided to do all of those monstrous things that he did. He decided that somewhere between 7 and 9 million people had to die for his country to be perfect. And we even know why he made these decisions, because he told people why he made these decisions, both in the form of a book and through numerous televised speeches, of which we still have on record. When I say Adolf Hitler was not a monster, I don't mean that he did not perform monstrous acts. I mean that there are no monsters in this world. There are only people and the decisions that they make. And if we deny trying to understand these people who perform these monstrous acts, if we deny that we need to understand what fascism is and why we need to understand it, if we deny those people of their autonomy, then we will never defeat fascism. I mentioned before that fascism is inherently individualistic, but it actually goes deeper than that. Now, fascism, at least as far as I understand, arises for the same reason that any sort of revolutionary sentiment arises. The oppressed peoples, the working class peoples, understand that they're getting the grift and want things to change. The difference between something like fascism and other philosophies like communism or anarchism is that while anarchists and communists understand that the problems that they face are societal, that it's a problem with how people behave in a broad way, fascists believe that not only can certain specific individuals or groups of people be blamed for their problems, but that they are being specifically and deliberately targeted. Who are the people that are targeting them? It doesn't matter. Those people exist as a scapegoat, and enough has been said about that I don't feel the need necessarily to extrapolate. That isn't a phenomenon unique to fascism. But the difference between those ideologies is one between understanding that we live in a society and understanding that we don't. Fascism is not a problem with a person. Adolf Hitler did not create Nazi Germany. Augusto Pinochet did not create fascist Chile. Donald Trump, I think we can all agree, did not create Donald John Trump. What happened is that all of them exploited problems in society to rise to power. And it's not just that regarding those horrible people, these people who perform these monstrous deeds, as being the sole reason that fascism exists, is a problem. It's stripping them of their autonomy, making them out to have it simply in their nature to destroy, like they're monsters. Strips fascism of its threat. If fascism is just a monster you have to slay, then it's not really a problem, is it? But that's not how it works. I'm going to say something maybe revolutionary, which means I'm going to be stepping on some toes. I want to make the world a better place for fascists. And it's because I want to make the world a better place for everyone. Even the fascists. And I believe that maybe you can't get rid of fascism entirely. But I believe that if you make the world that the fascists live in better, maybe they won't be so quick to take up the mantle of fascism. If the problems they face, which are ultimately the same problems that I face every day, poverty, hunger, despair, if those problems are solved, or at least alleviated, maybe we can get them to come to our side. Or at the very least, we won't need to face off with them so strongly. And I think that making it so that there are less fascists in the world is a goal worth working towards. A couple more things. So first off, it needs to be said that I am not any kind of authority on fascism, or indeed anything. I am a rube from cornfield land with the IQ of a gorilla that barely graduated from high school. This new understanding of fascism that I'm proposing isn't meant to be the definitive be-all, end-all, I have decided it is this kind of thing. It's just meant to begin a conversation about what we mean when we use the word fascism, and how we maybe approach these things in the wrong way. I had, as a joke, a lengthy list of videos that I actually went and recited. It's still on the card in the camera that I'm using, but that video ended up being like 20 minutes long. I'll link it up in the thing here, but 20 minutes is too much. It will break up the flow of the entire video, and I'm already bad enough at flow in videos as it is. Something that I'm a little bit concerned about, when I said that I wanted to make the world better for fascists, I didn't mean that I want to make it better for them on their terms. I'm one of the anti-fascists. You see, this is red and black. What I meant was that making the world better for everyone means making the world better for fascists, too. You don't just make the world better for good people, you have to make it better for the shitty people, too. And maybe, if you make things better for shitty people, they'll stop being shitty people. I am very anti-shitty people. Going back over the video, I'm not entirely certain that I made it explicit enough that I'm an opponent of fascism. And the reason that I spent so much time focusing on all of this is so that fascism can be better understood, explained, and opposed. And there are some little things, too. While I was editing, I figured out that, you know, America First is a good example of ideological purity, in that, like, it's not just about being a straight white man. It's not just about purity of ethnicity and spirit. It's about, you know, you believe in America. I would hope I don't have to explain to my audience how the Trump administration can be considered capitalist. And yet, here we are. I'm not sure I made it clear enough that I made the second group sexual repressives instead of male supremacists, because not all of them are strictly male supremacists. TERFs aren't male supremacists most of the time. And I think that's it. At least for now. Next video should either be something about Earthstrike, or a video about anti-fascism. It depends on whether or not I end up going to the thing in Chicago on Tuesday. Take care of yourselves, alright?